All right, good afternoon, grade sevens. I hope that you guys are all having a great week so far, guys. We're back again for another session this week. Yes, it is a little bit different than usual because of the day that we're holding our session on, as opposed to it having been on Wednesday. It's now today on Friday. Guys, this is not a permanent shift, it's just for the sake of this week alone. All right. Sometimes there are just one or two things that pop up that unfortunately I cannot avoid or control. So I do appreciate you bearing with me. But guys, it's time for our lesson of the week. I know that this is probably the least optimal time to be having a lesson at, especially on a Friday. But I hope that you guys will work with me nonetheless. We only have 1 hour, it's not that bad, and we've got quite a different topic today to discuss, which I hope is going to be exciting for many of you guys. We're going to be going through what we call the coordinate plane. Okay, we're going to discuss what it is, why we use it, and a whole bunch of other information around this topic so that you guys have a good idea around what's happening. Okay, so guys, we're going to get started pretty soon. I just want to give everybody 2 or so more minutes to join us, and then we're going to dive into today's work. I am going to start sharing my screen with you in the meanwhile, but if you guys have any questions for me, or there's anything you want to know, please make sure that you ask, and I'll do my best to answer your questions as soon as I see them come through the comment boxes. So it doesn't matter where you're watching from. If you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube, it's completely fine. But I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to quickly go and grab everything you need. Please make sure that you have a pencil and a ruler today, okay? A calculator isn't as necessary, but make sure that you have a pencil and a ruler. We are going to be doing a little bit of drawing, all right? In the meanwhile, guys, you should be able to see me scribbling on my screen in different colored pen: white, yellow, orange, and even green. If at any point during the lesson you cannot see this, you just need to please let me know by putting a message in the comment box so that I can then fix it as soon as possible. All right. But our heading for today is going to be the coordinate plane, and you can write the date as well if you'd like. It's the 16th of May, 2025. It's quite scary to think you guys are already halfway through your grade 7 year, guys. But I hope that things have been going according to plan so far. And I hope that I can help you work towards the marks that you are looking to get by the end of the year. Okay, so we're talking about what we call the coordinate plane. Uh, the date again is the 16th of May. So please make sure that you have that written down. And I want you guys to please do me a favor. We're going to draw 2 number lines very quickly, and then as soon as you guys have had an opportunity to copy it down, we will then start with today's lesson. Okay. All right. So the coordinate plane, guys, what in the world is this? I want us to draw 2 sets of lines like this, one perfectly vertical and one perfectly horizontal. Now, I want us to think of this dot in the middle as 0. I'll explain why in a second, but we're going to count up on the right-hand side in normal whole numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we'll just put a little arrowhead on the end there. And you can do the same on the other 3 ends of our 2 lines. All right. Now, again, thinking of this dot in the middle as 0, if we were counting up over here on the right-hand side, we would count backwards using our negative numbers on the left-hand side. -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5, and so on. We're then going to do the same thing on our vertical line, again treating this middle point as 0. So we will count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. If you guys have a few extra numbers, that's completely okay. But then as we move down, -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. I want you guys to please quickly copy this down onto your piece of paper in front of you. This is what we call the coordinate grid. Okay, I'm going to make 2 copies, so I'd like it if you guys could please do the same. If you don't draw this second one on the right hand side, then just draw it underneath the first one. All right. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 2 minutes to quickly copy down these coordinate planes, and then we're going to start talking about what they are and why we have them in the first place. Right, please copy down this grid twice. Please pay careful attention. The numbers on the right are positive, on the left are negative. Moving upward are positive, and moving downward are negative. Do not draw those signs in. Just make sure you see where the positive numbers are and where the negative numbers are. Right, quickly copy them down, please, and then we're going to start talking about all of the detail that we need to fill into these diagrams. Okay, so let's quickly just start discussing what these grids are, grade 7s. As you guys finish up with primary school, you will see that you pay less attention to the basics that you've been trying to perfect for so many years now, and you start learning some more new material, right? Work that is completely new to you. So the first of these topics that you're going to learn about that is distinctly new is this topic of the coordinate plane. Now, what in the world is that? So when we look at aeroplanes that are flying around, or we look at the globe and we want to find where an aeroplane is landing, or we want to know the exact position of a certain place in the world, we use what we call coordinates, right? Now, the coordinates that we use in maths are a little bit different, but they follow exactly the same concept, right? We always have a latitude and we have a longitude when we are looking at real world coordinates, when we're trying to pinpoint the exact location of where something is in the world. Now, in the same way that we do this, we also have a sort of GPS system, if you will, for maths, right? We use coordinates, but in this case, we don't use what we call latitude and longitude, which you will have learned about in geography. Instead, we use different kinds of values. Now, I'm going to explain this in detail, so please don't get nervous. But our coordinates are always made up of an x value and then a y value directly after that. So let's take a look at these grids and understand a little bit about them. Now, you guys might be thinking to yourselves, what in the world has a coordinate grid like this got to do with maths? Where am I going to use it? How does it apply to me? And these are all very good questions, guys. Now, it's a little bit difficult to explain how we use them right now in grade 7, but long story short, we're using it for the same reason that we would use coordinates in the real world. We want to be able to find exactly where something is on this grid, right? So for example, if I put an X all the way over here, how would I tell somebody this is where I'm standing, right? I can't just tell them, guys, I'm in the upper right-hand block of this upper right hand corner of this grid, right? I would need to be more specific than that. So we use different values, all these numbers that you see that we've written down, to help us pinpoint exactly where we are on this grid. And the reason why we need to be able to do this for maths is a little bit of a longer story. But you will see that this is a topic that becomes really important in grade 8, and you guys are going to use these grids, which we call coordinate planes, or they are sometimes known as Cartesian planes, right? We use these grid systems way more than you could possibly imagine in maths. So it only makes sense that we need to learn how to read them. So with that being said, let's take a look at one of these grids. I'm going to move the second one over for now. We'll come back to that in a second. We know that this grid is made up of two separate lines, right? The first line is a horizontal line that we see over here. And the second line is the vertical line that we see running from top to bottom. And these lines are called axes, grade 7s. And it's really important to understand because each of them is given a unique name. So the yellow line running from left to right is called our x-axis, right? Now, depending on how you've laid your work out, I want us to write some notes under these diagrams, okay? Even if it's towards the bottom of the page, it's okay. We want to write our first note. The horizontal line that creates the coordinate plane sorry guys, the horizontal line that creates the coordinate plane is called the x-axis. Okay, it's called the x-axis, the line running from left to right, right? That is our x-axis. So all of these numbers that we see along this horizontal number line are what we call x values, right? So you can do something like this for me. Highlight one or two of the numbers or circle them, underline them, whatever you want to do. We call these x values, right? And that makes sense. We find our x values all along our x-axis. Now remember, the line or the point, right in the middle should always be thought of as a 0, right? And when we move to the left or to the right, we count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and we could keep going. But when we move to the left in the opposite direction, just like a normal number line, we would need to start counting in negative numbers, right? So we go -1, -2, -3, and so on and so forth. So this horizontal line that creates the coordinate plane is called the x-axis. You can add onto this and say it has positive values on the right. It has positive x values on the right. And negative x values on the left. Now, you guys are going to use this an awful lot. And once you understand it, it's actually so much fun, guys. I know that sounds odd, but it's a break from all of the fractions and the decimals and the this and the that, right? It's a slightly different section of work, which is always welcomed. So we have this X line over here that we've highlighted in yellow, and on our x-axis, we have these X values. On the right-hand side, we have all of the positive X values, and on the left, we have all of the negative X values, right? Now that means that we need to have a similar setup with the vertical line, right? This vertical line over here that I have highlighted in orange grade 7s is known as the y-axis. The y-axis. So x is horizontal, y is vertical. Right. So looking at our y-axis now, this vertical line over here, we have what we call y values, right? It doesn't matter whether we're looking at the positive ones or the negative ones right now, but let's go ahead and just highlight or circle one or two of them. These are what we call our y values, and they are found by reading off of the y axis, our vertical line. Right. Y-axis, x-axis. Y values, x values. I hope that everything makes sense so far, grade sevens. Please remember that if you have a question, I'm more than happy to hear you out. This is going to be relatively new work for many of you, so I don't mind answering any questions that you guys have for me. Okay, so quickly take a second to copy the rest of this paragraph over here. We're going to write a second one down, but please also finish copying what we have on this diagram. With that being said, guys, I want you to draw an arrow to the dot that we have right in the middle. This dot where the two axes, our two lines cross one another, is called the origin. Right. And you can think of the value 0 for both of the lines. Now, when we look at our y-axis, this vertical orange line, you can see if we start at 0 right in the middle here at what we call the origin, if we count up, quite literally, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we go back to the origin and we decide to count down, -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. Okay. Right. There's a lot of information here already, so I'm going to give you a minute to copy. Then we're going to write down our second little paragraph of information. Okay, let's go ahead and write down a second paragraph here at the bottom under our notes section. So we've just mentioned the x-axis in our first paragraph. In the second paragraph, we'll talk about the y-axis. So the vertical line that creates the coordinate plane is called the y-axis. Okay, it's called the y-axis. And again, where do we find the positive and negative values? Well, it has positive y values. It has positive y values on the top half and negative y values on the bottom half. Okay. Point number 3. Quickly copy, and if you have any questions, please make sure to ask. Right, so what else do we need to know? Point number 3. To find exact locations, on the coordinate grid, we use values called coordinates. Surprise, surprise. Right, so we use coordinates just like you guys would think of coordinates for uh, geography. We're thinking of something very similar for maths. We just don't use longitude and latitude. We use these x and y values, grade 7s. We use values called coordinates, which are made up of one x value and one y value. Which is always written in the form x then y. And yes, they are written in brackets with a semicolon in between them. Okay, I'm going to show you guys what this looks like now. Please just copy this information down. It is extremely important. So we've got this massive grid, guys, and just like we do in the real world, we need to be able to tell people exactly where we are. Right? For example, if you live in Cape Town and you say, I live somewhere close to Table Mountain, while that helps a little bit, it's going to be impossible to find your friend. Right? So the more specific and the more accurate we can be with our coordinates, the easier it's going to be for us to find exactly what we are looking for on this coordinate plane. Right? Quickly copy. I'm going to give you 1 more minute, and then we're going to work on that second diagram that we drew. Okay, so if you guys need me to come back to this, please let me know. But I hope that you guys get a general feel for what's going on here, right? We've got this massive grid, and we just have to find ways to describe exactly where we are. Now, if we take a look at this second grid of ours, I'm just going to have to make one last copy for us to use later. I want to show you one more thing. I don't want to add it onto the same diagram, which is why I have asked you to draw a second one. Okay, so we can see that we have our x-axis that runs across the bottom over here. And we have the y-axis that runs vertically over here from top to bottom, right? We can relabel them on this diagram, that's fine. This is our x-axis moving from left to right, and from top to bottom we have our y-axis. Now, because we have these two lines that cut one another in half, we see that it creates four little pieces, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these little sections that we see the lines have created have got specific names. So that's what I want us to talk about now quickly. Okay? Think about a country, for example, guys. If I look at a country on the map, yes, I can see where South Africa is, but I can also see our country split up into its different provinces. You've got Gauteng, you've got the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, and so on and so forth, right? So we have a name for these four sections, but we can still zoom in more and get even more specific than that. So very quickly, the top right over here is what we call quadrant 1. Quadrant means piece of it's essentially one of four pieces, right? A quadrant, a section. So on the top right, we have quadrant 1. Please do not ask me why we don't say this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. We do not label it like this, okay? Instead, we have quadrant 1 on the top left, and then we move anti-clockwise. Top right. Then on the top left, we have quadrant 2. At the bottom left, we have quadrant 3. And finally, on the bottom right-hand side, we have quadrant 4. Now, yes, this is going to take a little bit of time to get used to, but you do need to remember which quadrant is which, right? Just like if I decide to point at a map of South Africa and I point at a specific province, you guys probably know what province is in what location, at least very roughly speaking. Okay, so we have quadrant 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4. Yes, it's in a little bit of a weird order, but there are reasons behind it. It's just that we are not going to go into these details today. Okay. Now, this is the last thing I want us to write down before we move on to trying to write down coordinates for ourselves. Let's take a look at quadrant 1 over here at the top right, grade 7s. And let's quickly pay attention to our x values and our y values. We're going to do this for each quadrant. We have x values and we have y values. Now, what do I want us to look at specifically? I'll show you in just a second. So, guys, the better that you can understand this now, the better chance you have at understanding some of the more complicated topics that you guys are going to run into as soon as you move into grade 8. So we've got quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Taking a look at the top right-hand side, quadrant number 1. Look at our x values over here, grade 7s. Are these x values positive or negative? Look at our x values in this quadrant. Are they positive or negative? We can see that our x values are positive, right? What about our y values? If we're sitting in this block, here's all of our y values on the orange y axis. All of these values are positive too, right? So in quadrant number 1, a really important characteristic that we need to remember is that our x values are positive and our y values are positive. And believe it or not, guys, this changes as we move from quadrant to quadrant. So over here, if we work in the top left-hand corner, quadrant number 2, are our x values here on our yellow line positive or negative? Look at our x values here on our x-axis, this yellow line. Our x values are clearly negative, but they were just positive in quadrant number 1. What about our y values though? We're still looking at the orange line, the vertical y-axis for our y values, and we can see that these are all still positive. Right? Now let's look at quadrant number 3 at the bottom left over here. This is a really weird one. Let's look at our x values. Remember, our x values always belong to the x-axis. In this case, it's our yellow line, right? Are our x values over here positive or negative, grade 7s? We can see our x values are negative. And I know that this, sorry, I know that this is going to take a little bit of practice, guys, so please don't worry. I'm just trying to give you lots of information now so that when we get our next lesson, we can practice this slowly. Let's look at our y values for quadrant 3. This is quadrant 3 over here. Our y values are always on the y-axis, which goes up and down. Are our y values over here positive or negative, grade 7s? We can see, looking at the numbers where my red dot is, that our y values are also negative here, right? And when we move into our final quadrant, quadrant number 4, the bottom right-hand corner of this coordinate plane, let's look at our x values first. Well, we look at the yellow line for our x values. All of our x values are back to being positive, grade 7s, right? And what about our y values? Looking at our y-axis, the vertical line, the orange one in this case, all of our y values here are negative. So what this does is points out to you guys that depending on which numbers are positive and which numbers are negative, we can actually get a pretty good idea of roughly where you are on this coordinate plane, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a second to quickly copy this down. I know that there's quite a bit, but I just want you to pay attention to how all these signs change as we move around the coordinate plane. Okay, because next what we want to do is talk about how we write down coordinates. Okay, so all those positive and negative numbers that we wrote down in the beginning seem kind of silly, but when we actually put everything together, we see that it can actually help to give us a very good idea of where we are on the coordinate plane, right? We know that if we have two positive values, we can only be up here on the top right hand side in quadrant number 1. If I have two numbers or two coordinate values that are negative, it means I must be somewhere down here in quadrant number 3, because this is the only place where we have two negative values, right? So now, guys, instead of just worrying about what is 1 plus -1 or 7 minus 12, the positive and negative sign that we see in front of our numbers actually plays a huge role in the way that we start to look at things in maths, right? So you guys have spent so much time now doing fractions and decimals and percentages and time, and now you guys are getting your first real look, other than algebra, into what kind of stuff you might start learning about in grade 8. And I think it's really exciting because as we practice using these coordinate planes more and more, grade 7s, you guys are going to start learning how we draw all of these different kinds of graphs, right? And this is actually way more fun than you can imagine. And it's an awesome break, like I said, from all of the algebra and the fractions that you guys are going to be dealing with. Okay. So not only do we use this coordinate plane to help us find where something is, but it actually also forms the foundation of graphs. And graphs is a huge topic in high school grade 7s. It is huge. Okay. So I hope that you're finding some of this exciting, guys. I really do. I know that it's not the best time to have a lesson at now on a Friday, but we've got just under 15 minutes left, and then you guys are free to enjoy your weekends. Okay. So we're going to finish 5 minutes early today, but I want to give you an idea as to what you want to look forward to for next week's lesson. Right? Right. I'm assuming that you guys are done copying. If you need me to come back so that you can finish, please let me know. So we've been through quite a lot of information already, grade 7s. And let's take one last look at this coordinate plane. I didn't ask you to write down a third one. This is just to give you guys an idea of what we're going to be talking about next week. But if you guys would like to copy this down, you're more than welcome to. So, when we want to find the exact location of something on this coordinate plane, we use coordinates. And a coordinate is always written, like we said, with an open bracket, then your x value, always the x value first, then a semicolon, then your y value, and then you may close your brackets. So Let's say, for example, I put a yellow dot right over here. Okay? There's my first yellow dot. How do I explain to somebody where I am on this grid using coordinates? Well, I already know that I need to find an x value and a y value. So let's find our x value first. Remember, our x value is always found on the x axis. That's this horizontal line over here, right? When we want a y value, where should we look? We want to look at the y-axis, which is the vertical line running up and down. Okay, this is our y-axis. So let's find the coordinates of our yellow dot. We'll open our brackets, and we know that we must start by finding an x value. So I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to draw from my dot down to my x-axis and see what I line up with. I can see over here, my yellow dot has an x value of 3. Right? There's my x value, the number 3. So I can go and write positive 3 down into my brackets and then write my semicolon. Then after I have my x value, I need my y value. So I'm going to line my dot up with the y-axis, grade 7s. And when I do this, we can see that we line up with the number 5. Right over here, we line up with a y value of 5. Why is it a y value? Because it's on the y-axis. So there's our y value. So I can go ahead and write down the number 5 in my brackets. And there we go, grade 6s. You guys just found your very first coordinate on the coordinate plane, or what we sometimes call the Cartesian plane. Okay. Let's say I wanted to find another dot. Let's say I wanted this green dot. Let's go and find the coordinates of our green dot, grade 7s. Remember, any coordinate will always be written in the form x, then y. So, looking at our new green dot over here, let's find its x value. How do we find the x value? We're going to draw a dotted line all the way to the x-axis. Here's the x-axis over here. So we can see that our dot lines up with an x value of positive 6. So we can go and open our brackets, and the first part of our coordinate, the x value, is the number 6. Okay? Then if I wanted my y value next, the second number in my coordinate, I would need to line my dot up with the y-axis for the y value. And when we line this up, you see that we get a value on the y-axis of positive 3. So now we can write in the value 3 over here and close our brackets. And there we go. Guys, You have officially found your first two coordinates. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through this in more depth today because I can imagine that you guys are exhausted and there's only 5 minutes left of today's lesson. But let's quickly recap over everything that we've spoken about today, and then you guys, we will be done for the day. All right. Let's do this in as short a time as possible. Just stick with me for the next 1 minute. What did we talk about today, grade sevens? We spoke about this weird thing called the coordinate plane. What is the coordinate plane? It's two lines, one that's perfectly horizontal and one that's perfectly vertical, right? These two lines are actually number lines, which means that they've got both positive numbers and negative numbers. We know that we can get our x values off of our x-axis, and our y values are read off of the y-axis, right? We also know that where the two axes, these two lines, cut one another in the middle, we get what's called the origin. And we can think of this as the value 0 for both of the number lines, right? Now, when we dive into it in a little bit more detail, we can see that there are 4 little corners that we find on the coordinate plane. And they're labeled a little bit weirdly because we actually start at the top right, which feels a little bit weird. We have quadrant 1, then 2, then 3, and then 4 as we move in an anti-clockwise direction. And we have unique names or numbers for each of these quadrants because they have different signs attached to their values, right? So we know that quadrant 1 has got positive x values and positive y values. But quadrant 4, for example, still has those positive x values, but now our y values have become negative. So each quadrant is unique because it has specific characteristics. So we need to be very careful with our positive and negative signs. Okay. And after learning all of this, grade sevens, you guys found out that we talk about a specific location on this grid by using coordinates, okay? And coordinates are always written in the form x, y, and we took a look at how we find two coordinates, but we're going to go through this in a lot more detail next week. All right. And that's really it, guys. That was today's lesson. I hope that it was something new, something a little bit different, and not so repetitive like maths can sometimes be. Guys, our lesson is done for today. Like I said, we'll talk about these coordinates and practice writing them out a little bit more in next week's lesson. All right. So please don't worry too much about that. This was very much a theory lesson. All right. With that being said, guys, we are not going to look at an iRainbow quiz today because we haven't chatted about enough just yet. So our next lesson will be next week, Wednesday again. Please, grade sevens, remember our next lesson is next week, Wednesday. This week was an exception. Okay, we're going back to normal again next week. You'll get a message on the WhatsApp group to remind you. So just double check everything next week, Monday, when you get the message and you're planning for your week. And then please just keep in mind, guys, we have recordings of all of our lessons, this one included. So if you want to go back and use videos to help you revise for your upcoming exams, I would also suggest you use iRainbow to practice all of the sections that you need to study for your exam. Okay, remember you can find all of the recordings of these lessons on either Facebook, on the iRainbow exclusive community Facebook page, or right here on the iRainbow Education YouTube channel. Okay, so please, guys, use these resources. I didn't see any questions today, so I'm going to assume that everyone had a pretty good idea of what was going on and I didn't overwhelm you guys too much. But with that being said, guys, like I promised, we are done. I will speak to you guys all again next week, Wednesday, for our next lesson. If you have any questions, please make sure that you write them down and bring them with you to our next lesson. But until then, guys, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. But I'll chat to you all again then. All right. Thank you so much, grade sevens. Enjoy, guys.